everyone, it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, I'm going to show you how to crochet this beautiful, easy crochet cocoon cardigan. Now, if you've never heard of a cocoon cardigan, that is simply taking a rectangle, folding it inward to create sleeves, and then you can add some edging and length to the bottom and the front and the sleeves that we're going to do as well. So it's a really simple pattern for beginners. If you've ever wanted to make a cardigan but we're feeling a little intimidated by it, this is a great place to start. Likewise, if you've ever wanted to try this type of cocoon cardigan, this is also a great pattern. It has a lot of really pretty texture. We're going to be doing that with the corner to corner stitch, and then we've added a simple double crochet edging to around the cardigan, to the bottom, around the sides, and to the sleeves too, just to give it a little bit of interest. So we're going to be going through this sweater step by step and stitch by stitch. We're going to start by making the rectangle. Later on in the video, we're going to learn how to fold it in and seam it to make these sleeves here. It has such a unique shape as well. You can also see photos of it on my dress form on the blog, so you can see how it looks on. But also, we're going to be learning how to add some edging to around our cardigan and some edging to our sleeves, just to give it a more finished look. All of the stitches are very easy. We're just going to be using some double crochets, some single crochets, and then for the corner to corner is just chains and double crochets. So very simple stitches, but as you can see, it gives us a lot of beautiful texture, both inside and outside of our sweater. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk a little bit about sizing because this is a very customizable sweater. And then we're going to just start working on our rectangle. Okay, let's talk a little bit about sizing. Now, before we go into the finished piece dimensions, like I mentioned before, our cardigan started out as a rectangle. So we're going to be working to make a rectangle that's 30 inches wide and 40 inches long. Now, this also can be adjusted if you want to change the size of your sweater. It's kind of like the foundation. Everywhere where you see this single, corner to corner crochet stitch was the rectangle. This is the edging that we'll be adding later. So 30 inches by 40 inches for the beginning rectangle, which of course can be adjusted. Now, what I did when I was making my rectangle was I laid the rectangle out, did the folds that we'll learn later in the video, and kind of held them together. You can sort of clip them together and popped it on just to see. If not, I made it a little bit bigger and adjusted accordingly. You can also measure yourself first and go by those dimensions as well as you're working. Now, as we have our finished piece here, we have from the top, like including the edging, the neck, all the way down to the bottom here is about 32 inches. Now, if we go from the widest points, so you can see our sleeves, the way they lay, they're sort of like in the front, okay? So if we go from the widest points here across, that's another 32 inches. Now, our edges that we did, I just did a couple of rounds on the sleeve. So that was 1.5 inches, an inch and a half. And then I did the neck and around the bottom part here, a little bit thicker, and that is about 2 inches, okay? Again, if you want more coverage across the front, you can keep going with that edging. It's very flexible, okay? So now with our measurements, let's jump in, learn about the materials and kind of the amount of yarn that you'll need, and then we're going to go right into making that rectangle. So let's get started. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle. A tape measure will be especially helpful. We're going to be making 2 rectangles and measuring them. So this will be helpful as you go along to get the size that you'd like. We're going to be using a 6mm J crochet hook. This is my Furls Wood Streamline. If you'd like to get one for yourself, I'll put the link down below. And let's talk about this beautiful yarn. I have this lovely blue color. It's kind of like a slate blue. This is called Color Theory from Two of Wands and Lion Brand yarn. I've used this yarn before for other projects, and I just love the color palettes, and it just feels so nice and it's easy to work with. So I'm going to be using 5 balls of the Color Theory. And each ball of this is 246 yards, 225 meters, 3.5 ounces and 100 grams. Now the total yardage for this, because it's 5 balls of yarn, is 1,230 yards. We're going to be using that for the 2 rectangles and also some edging later. So you'll need 5 balls of this, or 1,230 yards of medium 4 yarn on the yarn weight scale. So if you go to your yarn label, if you need to substitute yarn, look for the little ball of yarn with the number on it, is how it usually looks. And this is a medium 4 on the yarn weight scale, and it recommends a 5.5 millimeter I crochet hook. You may notice that we're going up 1 hook size to the 6 millimeter J. That's because I wanted it to, we're going to be doing the corner to corner techniques when we do the stitching part of our rectangle. And I just wanted it to be a little bit looser and not be stiff, because it is going to be a garment that we'll be wearing. Okay, so we are going to go up 1 hook size. So if you need to substitute yarn, once again, look for that medium 4 on the yarn weight scale and one that recommends the I hook. Okay, and you'll be just fine. Now the color I'm using, you could do stripes or variegated yarn or whatever you like. I'm going to be doing just a solid blue. I really love this blue. I wanted to have a sweater in this blue. This is called Stonewash, the color I'll be using. And as a side note, I'm using 5 balls of the same color. So this does come in dye lots. You want to make sure that all your dye lots match when you get the yarn. So if you look at, compare 2 balls of yarn like this, my dye lots match, and you want to make sure all of your yarn matches. Usually when you order it online, they'll match the dye lots for you. They should. And that will give you the most consistent color throughout your project. If you start mixing up dye lots, you could run into the risk of maybe having more of a brighter section of your project, or like a darker section of your project. So just make sure your dye lots match up if you're not familiar with dye lots. So we're going to get started and make the 2 rectangles first. Then we're going to do some seaming and kind of some finishing off and make it look more finished with some edging, etc. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to take my yarn and my hook, and what we're going to do is put a slip knot on our hook to begin. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up the loop, and tighten. Next, what you're going to do is chain 6. So to make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then what we're going to do is in the 4th chain from the hook. So this loop here does not count. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4 in that 4th chain from the hook. We're going to make a double crochet. So wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into that 4th chain from the hook, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring through the first 2 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops. Then we're going to work, and I'm going to zoom in just a hair more. There we go. That way you can really see what I'm doing here. Then we're going to work a double crochet into the next chain. Then we're going to work a double crochet into that last chain, okay? So this is row 1. Row 1 will be our first block, okay? So it's easy to know what row you're on because you can just count the blocks, okay? Now, this tail here, I always like to use, just a tip that I like to give for corner to corner projects. Just make sure that this tail is facing you, because we're going to turn our blocks as we work more rows, and it's just kind of a way to like get you back into the right place. So I like to leave that tail alone and weave it in later, okay? Now we're ready to start on row 2. Row 2 will be 2 blocks, okay? So to begin row 2, we're going to once again chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, after we've done our chain 6, we're going to once again, because we're starting a new row, go into that 4th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and work a double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook. So double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook, and then go into the next chain, work a double crochet into the next chain, and a double crochet into the next chain. Now, when I mentioned the tail earlier, this is where it really helps. So you can see the tail is kind of over here, but we need to turn our work, okay? So what you're going to do is turn your block here so that it's that tail is facing you again. That's how I like to remember it, okay? Because that's the bottom, okay? So now we're gonna bring our 2 blocks together with a slip stitch. So when we did our little turning chain at the top here, it created a space. You're gonna go into that turning chain space at the top here, bring up a loop. Now bring the loop through the loop that's already on your hook, and that will connect the 2 blocks together, okay? Now we're not quite done the row. We did 1 block of row 2. Now we're going to move and do the other block. So to do the next block, chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to get a little bit more yarn here. And now where we join the blocks together in that turning chain space, that same turning chain space, work 3 double crochet. So 1, 2, and 3. And now row 2 is complete. It almost looks like a little heart, okay? Now let's move on to row 3. Row 3, we're going to be creating 3 blocks, so it's really easy to remember. Now, this is going to be the bottom edge of our rectangle. We're going to keep going until our rectangle gets the width that we want. So this first part of our rectangle, we're working on the width. The second part of our rectangle, we're going to work on the height. And then the last part, we're going to sort of close it up. Okay, let's move on to row 3. Row 3 is kind of the row that you'll be repeating for the rest of your width, okay? So like I explained, the 3 parts, the rest of part 1, okay? So what we'll do is we're going to, once again, because we're starting a new row, we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to go once again into the 4th chain from the hook. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. Same thing we did before. This will seem very much like row 2, but I wanted to go through row 3 with you just to show you as we build. Work a double crochet into that next chain, and a double crochet into that next chain. And once again, we're going to use our tail as a little helper as we turn our work, because it's going to be kind of off to the side here, as you can see. It's kind of like, so we want to turn it so that it faces us once again. And then we're going to join these blocks together. So locate that turning chain space into the block that you're joining it to. Just like that. And now we're ready to make the second block of our row. So chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And work 3 double crochets into that same turning chain space at the top of the block. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. All right, for our final block of row 3, we're going to join once again into that space, that turning chain space with a slip stitch. Chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and 3 more double crochet into that same space. So 1, 2, and 3. Just like that, okay? I'm just going to grab a little bit more yarn. All right, so row 3 is complete. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to keep working on the width. So I'm trying to like lay this down in so it looks like the bottom of our rectangle. We're going to keep adding rows, keep repeating row 3 that we just did. If you need to back up the video and watch it again a few times, you can totally do that. But we're going to work until we get about 30 inches across. So this is where your tape measure comes in handy. You're going to go till about 30 inches across. Now have it pulled out to 30. So keep going until this bottom edge. You can use the tail once again as a helper. This is your bottom corner. And then just keep measuring as you go. Now, if you want a different size, we talked about sizing a little bit earlier in the video. If you need to change the width of your triangle, you know, you can do that. But just keep working your rows until your bottom edge is about 30 inches long or your desired width, okay? So I'm going to keep going and keep repeating row 3 until I get 30 inches across. And then we will rejoin, and then we're going to start working upward and getting the height that we want, which just to say it ahead of time is 40 inches. So we're going to go 30 inches across by repeating row 3, and then we'll rejoin and start to get some height on our piece. Okay, I'm just working that very last block of my row, working 3 double crochets for each block. And now part 1 is complete. So let's just, I'm going to zoom out so you can see this a little bit better. We're going to look at what we have so far. So far we started here at the bottom and we've been working our way upward and outward. We've been doing an increase on both sides of our piece. And now we need to kind of switch gears a little bit and move on to part 2. So right now we have a big triangle, as you can see here, and this will actually be turned. So using this tail as a guideline still, put that tail in the bottom corner here, and we worked across until our bottom edge here was about 30 inches long, okay? So from this little block here in the end, all the way across to this bottom corner where we began with our tail, 30 inches. Now, we need to start moving upward, okay? So what we're going to do for part 2 is we're going to, now we increased on both sides. So every time we started a new row, we did the chain 6 and all that to do our increase. Now we're just going to increase on one side and we're going to decrease on the other side. So what that's going to do is that's going to help us, we have our triangle here, instead of working outward both ways, one side will start to just move up straight and one side will continue to go outward, okay? So it'll create this triangle and kind of fill, or the beginnings of a rectangle rather. It'll kind of fill in this area here and we're going to be moving straight up. So we've established our width now. Now we're going to start establishing the height of our rectangle, okay? And later on for part 3, we'll kind of close that rectangle up at the top here, okay? Okay, so I like, when I'm doing a corner to corner rectangle like this, I like to use a stitch marker and put it in the side where I'm decreasing. And that way, when I see this, it indicates to me stop and decrease right here, okay? So we're gonna do, our hook is up here. We're going to increase when we start crocheting again, okay? So go down to the other corner here and just throw your stitch marker in there, okay? And we'll take care of that when we come down there, okay? So let's go back up here, and what you're going to do is we're going to increase on this corner, work the row that we normally would, and then when we get down here, we'll decrease, okay? So we're going to increase, work the row, then decrease. So let's get started on that. I'm going to zoom way in so you can see. Now this part should seem pretty familiar. We're going to do the same thing we've been doing. So once again, chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then once again, same thing, work a double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So work your double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook, double crochet into the next chain, and double crochet into the next chain. Okay, and then we're going to once again connect our blocks. So turn your work, connect the block, same thing we've been doing all along, okay? And you might want to turn things around just to make it a little easier to work on it. Once again, same thing we did, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, work 3 double crochet in that turning chain space. So you're just going to work across like we have been doing all along, okay? So work 3 double crochet in the space, then slip stitch into the next square, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and so forth, okay? So just work the row across the same way we've been doing all along. And then when we get towards the end of this row, I'm going to show you how to do that decrease I was telling you about. Down here where we have our stitch marker, all the way down here. So that's like our little indicator that we need to do something different, okay? So let's continue across on our own. And when we get towards the end of the row, getting a little closer to the stitch marker, I'll show you what to do. Okay, we're just coming up to the end of the row, making this second to last block here. So go ahead and make your block, just like that, and then connect the 2. And then you have one more block to make. So we're going to just leave that stitch marker in place just so it can hang out and show us that we're not going to increase here, okay? So go ahead and make the last block of the row. So chain 3 and 3 double crochet in that space right there. So 1, 2, and 3, okay? So normally we would do the chain 6 and continue the other way, but because we're doing, this is our decrease side now, we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're only going to do that increase down here at the other end, okay? So what you want to do now, when you have your stitch marker or your yarn scrap, you'll turn your work instead, and you're going to work a slip stitch into each one of these stitches that you just made. So insert the hook into the first stitch, bring up a loop. Now bring that loop through the loop that's already on your hook, and then go to the next stitch and do the same thing, and the next stitch and do the same thing. Okay, now we're ready to turn this because we're going to start working upward. Okay, so what you'll do here is, let me just zoom in a little here. You'll chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and you'll work into that space. Work your 3 double crochet. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. Just like that. Now connect it to the next block, and then just keep working across the same way you've been doing. So chain 3 and 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Just like that. Okay, so just keep working across, and you're just going to be doing this for the rest of the piece until, now let's go back over here. I want to just kind of show you what we have going on here, and we can zoom out a little bit. Now, let me move my hook. Now you can see we have a corner now. See how we have like a, this is now the bottom corner, similar to over here. We now have 2 bottom corners, and we're going to be working upward, okay? Now, you're going to keep working upward until your piece has a height. The highest point is 40 inches, okay? So right now, if we get our tape measure out, it's probably going to be a little over 30 inches, but let me just show you anyway. Grab your tape measure, and you start here at the bottom, and go straight up like this. Yeah, it's right at 30 inches, okay? So what you're going to do is just keep repeating the row that we just did over and over and over again until it has a height of 40 inches, okay? So you're going to put some more rows in there and work upward. And then when we rejoin, we'll be almost done the second part. We'll finish the second part together, and we'll move on to the third part and kind of close up that rectangle, okay? So keep repeating the row we just did. When you don't see your stitch marker, you do the increase, the chain 6 and so forth. When you see your stitch marker, you do the decrease, which is where you slip stitch over. And so as you keep working more rows, you're going to start getting a straight side all the way up, okay? So keep repeating that row we just did. You can back up the video at any time and rewatch it. There's also a slow motion feature on YouTube if you would like to utilize that as well. So keep going with this second part we just learned, and when we rejoin, we're going to have a height of 40 inches, and we're going to move on to part 3. Okay, just coming up to the end of the last row here for part 2. So I'm going to work those last stitches and connect those last 2 blocks, okay? So before we move on to part 3, rather, let me just show you where we're at here. So we've been working part 2 where we were decreasing on one side and still increasing on the other side. And what we have here now is, let me just straighten it out here. If we zoom out a little, you can see we now have a bottom edge, and we have a corner here that we've established, and we also have a corner down here. So we have the bottom of our rectangle established, and as you move upward, we now have this large sloping top, and it kind of comes up to a point. So if you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned that the highest top point here, keep working the same rows of part 2 until the bottom corner all the way up to that highest peak is 40 inches. So we've come to the 40-inch mark here, and now we're ready to move on to part 3. So part 3 now is going to be, we're going to be decreasing on both sides now. So we're going to decrease, work across to the other corner, decrease, work across, across, and so forth. So what we'll be doing is for our slope here, we're going to be coming straight up still, like we have been doing, but we're also going to come straight across. So we're going to be bringing it in on both sides, okay, and closing up that top corner of the rectangle to complete its shape, okay? So let's do that together. We'll do the first row together, and then you can kind of keep on going with it. So what we're going to do is we just finished the last row. And so what we're at, we're decreasing on both sides, remember? So we're going to turn. So we can actually take the stitch marker out now. We don't need anything to tell us when to decrease because we're doing it on both sides now. So we're going to turn. And once again, this will seem familiar. We're going to slip stitch into each stitch across. So slip stitch, slip stitch, slip stitch, just to get us over to the right spot. And you can turn your work if you need to. And then we will chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And actually I'm going to zoom in. I forgot to zoom back in to show you. So we'll chain 3 here and then work your 3 double crochets in that space on the side of the block. So 1, 2, and 3. And the rest should seem very familiar. You're just going to do the same thing across. So join that into the next block with a slip stitch and then chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and so forth. This part will seem very familiar. You're just going to work across. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so let's work across on our own. And when we get towards the end of this row that we're working on, I'm going to show you how to decrease on this side as well. So this side, see, this is our tall point that we worked up, up, up and increased. We're going to start decreasing now. So what's going to happen is we're going to start getting a flat top across, all the way across here like that. Okay, so let's work across. When we get towards the end of this row, we'll rejoin together and I'll show you how to work the end of this row as well. Okay, we're just coming up to the end of the row again. So I'm going to work that last block. So chain 3, 3 double crochet, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to connect the blocks like I've been doing, just like that. And then because we're decreasing, we're going to turn the work at this point. So flip it over. And then we're just going to do what we did back at the beginning of the row too, okay? So slip stitch into each stitch across. So slip stitch into that first stitch, slip stitch into the next stitch, slip stitch into the next stitch, and then we're going to turn it a little bit and keep going to the next, across the next row, okay? So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, work your 3 double crochets in that space on the side of the block like we've been doing. 1, 2, and 3. Whoops, I dropped my loops here. There we go. And then we're going to connect those blocks and just keep going, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to be repeating the row that we just did over and over and over again until your rectangle is starting to close up. So when we get almost to the point, that last block, which would be the corner of the rectangle, we get almost to that point, we'll rejoin again and I'll show you how to finish that up. And then we'll have our full rectangle. So after we've completed our rectangle, what we're going to do is start seaming some things together to create sleeves and create the front of our cardigan. And then we're going to add some sleeve detailing and edging detailing just to make it look a little bit more finished, okay? So keep going with the row that we just did. If you need to back up the video or use the slow motion feature, feel free to do that. But we're just going to keep working until that point just comes to almost a close, and then we'll rejoin, finish that up, and then move on to the next part. Okay, just finishing that last part here. We've come all the way up and now we're at the top point. As you can see, I have one more block to make. So what we want to do is join that second to last block where we are, and we're going to turn our work, same thing we've been doing. And we're just going to slip stitch over. It's the same exact thing we've been doing, but I did want to do that very last block with you. So just slip stitch into each of these 3 stitches, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then work 3 double crochet in that space, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, then we're going to join those blocks together with a slip stitch, and our rectangle is complete. So what we want to do now is just cut the yarn. I'm going to grab my scissors. Cut the yarn, leaving a tail that you can weave in later. And we're just going to fasten off, okay? Okay, so now that our rectangle is ready to go, we're going to seam it. And it's a really fun way that this transforms from a rectangle to a cardigan. So we have the rectangle with 4 corners. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to slide down one side so you can see it. What we're going to do is take one of the corners up here and we're going to fold it inward. And then we're going to scoot down to the bottom and take another corner and we're going to bring that one and fold that one inward. Now you can see where I laid out the whole rectangle kind of out on a table so you can see the whole thing. Those photos are on the blog. There's one of the rectangle and then each side folded in so you can see that. Now you're going to do the same thing, so let's scoot this down on the other side. So we're going to fold this corner down, fold this corner up, and you want your line to be sort of similar. So as you can see, they're not really similar. So you may need to adjust a little bit, pulling up, maybe pull this down, slide this up, but just make sure that you can draw an imaginary line across, okay? So now this is actually going to be the neck of our piece, and this is going to be the shoulders up here, and this will eventually be the armhole. So you'll want to, I'm going to fold this in just to scoot this out of the way. So you'll eventually, this will be an armhole. So you'll want to imagine how big of an opening you'll want your armholes to be. Now this is kind of a loose, kind of drapey sweater. So we want it to be kind of loose and open as well. So I'm going to make an imaginary line, or you can grab a stitch marker and your tape measure because you want it to be the same on both sides. So if I kind of eyeball the size armhole that I want and mark it, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. That's why we're marking it. And then you can measure. So you can say from the edge here, it's about 4.5 inches, okay? Okay, so grab your yarn and we're going to cut, I would say about 24 inches, 18 to 24 inches is fine. And we're going to start seaming this together. So we're going to go from where we marked it with our stitch marker. Now you can do this with a piece of scrap yarn, or you can just, in your mind, just count the blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're 7 blocks in, and you can just remember that either way. So we're going to start here, and we're going to sort of sandwich these edges together. And let me just zoom in so you can see a little bit better. And we're just going to sew to the spot we marked. So we have a tail here, so I'm going to start here so I can tie it onto my piece of yarn here. I can tie it onto the tail. You may not have one. If not, you can just put a nice little knot there. And we're just going to whip stitch it. Whip stitch is a seam that I use quite a bit with my projects. So you may have, if you've done projects with me, you may have used a whip stitch before. But all it is a really easy spiral through your work, okay? So we're just going to whip stitch all the way across, and we're using a matching piece of yarn so that it's pretty much invisible as we seam, okay? Make sure your blocks as you seam are going to be nice and lined up, because you will see them, that seam, when you wear it, and it will be pretty invisible, but you still want to make sure it's nice and neat. So we're just seaming across here, all the way across to our little stitch marker. So I'm still sandwiching my layers together and just going across with my needle. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And the fact that we measured is really helpful so that we can do the same exact thing on the other side and both armholes will match up, okay? So here we are, we're getting towards the end. I'm just going to pop this stitch marker off because it's kind of getting in the way now because we're closer. I'm just going to put another stitch or two in here, And then when you get to the end, pull almost all the way through till you have a loop and send your needle through that loop, and you can tighten. And if you want to, because this is a garment and you will be pulling it as you wear it, it'll get some strain, you can put an extra stitch in there. Now straighten out your seam a little bit, and we're going to turn this right side out in a minute. This is actually going to be the inside. I didn't really go into that too much because our fabric is reversible. Looks the same on both sides. So the inside out, we haven't really determined. Just weave that tail in right then and there. And I like to go in both directions just to kind of lock it into place. And then you can just snip, okay? So we're gonna repeat the same thing on the other side. So grab your stitch marker and your tape measure once again. And as you can see, just to show you for a second, we have a nice armhole and we're starting to get a cardigan shape. So much fun. All right, so let's scoot down to the other side. I'm gonna grab my yarn and my needle and just head over to this side. So just to refresh, we have about 4.5 inches of the seam over here, okay? So we're gonna do the same thing on this side when we sew. It's just so we have a consistent armhole here where we put our arms into our cardigan, okay? So I just marked that spot. And once again, we're gonna take a piece of yarn about 18 to 24 inches long, and we're gonna do the same on this side. Okay, coming up to the end, I'm just gonna pop that stitch marker off once again and put that last stitch in there. Remember, leave a little loop so you can send it through. And then I like to just repeat so it's locked in place. Now I'm just gonna weave this end in right here and there. While my needle is already threaded, it'll save you a minute later. Go in one direction and come back in the other direction. Okay, so it's getting really exciting now. We just have to do a few more things. Now you could totally wear your sweater as is. You could totally pop this on right now, and actually I would recommend that you do that. Make sure that your armholes are how you want them to be. Everything's laying properly, etc. This again is a slouchy kind of sweater. I would like to add an edge to this. I want to give this a little bit of a nice little collar, okay? And we're going to add a little bit of edging to both the neck. So it's going to just come around. If we look at this from top here all the way to the bottom, you can see it's just a big circle. So we're going to learn how to put a little bit of an edging on one of our sleeves. And you'll know once you do the sleeve, because this is a circle, this is a circle, the neck part and the front, and then our other sleeve is a circle. So we're going to learn how to put the edging on one of our sleeves, and then we're going to keep going with the other parts kind of on our own, because all three parts, both armholes and the opening, will be done the exact same way, okay? So let's learn how to do our edging on one of our sleeves, okay? Again, it's done the same way, so once you do it for one, you'll just do it for the other ones. The only difference being this opening here is just much larger, okay? So what you're gonna do, because we did a corner to corner square or rectangle, we're gonna have boxes for this first round that we will be working into. So see the boxes, now some of them, if we look closely, let me zoom in so I can show you. Some of our squares are gonna be vertical. You can see the stitches are vertical. Some of our squares, the stitches are gonna be on their side, horizontal. So we're gonna learn how to work into both of those scenarios. So what we wanna do, we're gonna begin crocheting, so we don't need to cut the yarn. We're gonna grab our hook, and what you're gonna do is just locate any square, and you're gonna insert your hook into the square, okay? Hook the yarn on. We're gonna be working in some half double crochets and some double crochet stitches, and that will allow us to mix up the texture a little bit. We're gonna have a nice border that will sort of add a little bit of stitchy difference in texture, okay? So we tied our new yarn on. Now you're going to reinsert your hook back into that stitch, bring up a loop. Our first round, we're going to do some half double crochet stitches. And then from there on, we'll do double crochet stitches. The reason I'm doing 2 different stitches is because the half double crochet stitches will give us a nice density where those that edging meets our squares. It'll give a nice uniform, kind of more dense look. As we go beyond the half double crochet round to the next round and do just regular double crochets, we're going to start to get some length, okay? So one is going to give us a nice little neat, dense transition, and then we'll start adding length with the double crochets, okay? So what we want to do is chain 2, 1, 2. That counts as our first half double crochet of the round, okay? So for each block, the only rule of thumb to remember for this round is that you want to put 3 stitches in each block. So you have a block here, we're going to put 3 stitches into that. The next block, even though it's on its side, you still want to make sure you get 3 stitches into that, okay? So let's do a few together and then we'll kind of depart. So again, this chain 2 counts as one of our half double crochets, and we're going to put another half double crochet. You just want to kind of look for a loop or a stitch that you can work it into. Okay, and then we'll work into the third one. Okay, and then we can move on to the next block. Okay, so next, work a half double crochet. We're going to do 3 in this block. So 1, 2, and 3. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to mention. If you're not familiar with the half double crochet, okay, so we did 3 in that block. Now let's move on to the next one. If you're not familiar with the half double crochet, all you want to do is wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into this stitch, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops, and that's how you do it. I just realized we hadn't done that stitch yet in this project. Okay, so that was 1 stitch. Again, we're doing 3 per block, 2, and 3. Sometimes you got to wiggle them in there a little bit, especially those blocks that are laying on their sides, okay? We're not working into like nice, neat stitches like we will in the next round. The stitches will be more defined when we do our next round, okay? Let's do this one more time and then we'll kind of depart. So we'll work 3 half double crochets into the side of this next block. 1, 2, and 3. Just like that, okay? So let's keep moving all around this sleeve and just work 3 stitches into each block all the way around, 3 half double crochets, and then when we rejoin, we'll rejoin towards the end of this round and we'll start on the next round. The next round you can repeat as many times as you want depending on the length of the sleeve that you want, okay? So let's keep going and we'll rejoin in just a minute. Okay, we're just coming around, working that last stitch, that last half double crochet. And then to close the round, we're just going to count 2 chains up where we began. Remember that chain 2? Insert the hook into that chain, bring up a loop. We're going to close it with a slip stitch. So bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, okay? Now you can see already our sleeve has a little bit of a more finished look, okay? And that's what we're after. I'm going to add one more round just to show you. Our next round is our double crochet round. That will give us a little bit of length, okay? So what we're going to do this time is chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to work a double crochet, and we're going to work a double crochet into that first stitch and in every stitch around. Now this round is a little bit easier because we are going to have some defined stitches, okay? Before we were kind of searching for them in the sides and the tops of our blocks, okay? So just work a double crochet in each stitch around. This is the part of our sweater that is going to be customizable. So this round here, you could just do once, or you could keep going if you want a longer sleeve. So if you just want a little bit of a finished edge on there, you can just kind of work 1 or 2 more. If you want a longer sleeve, you can keep going as long as you need to, okay? So keep going with your double crochets and we'll rejoin in just a minute. Okay, we're just coming around, just a couple of double crochet stitches left of our round, okay? And there's 1 there. And then when you get to the end, count 3 chains up this time, because remember we did 3 chains at the beginning of this round. And we're gonna join with a slip stitch to close the round, okay? So at this point, you can decide if you're happy with the length of this sleeve, or I can move my hook, or if you want to keep going with that. Now let me just flip this around so you can see here. But you can see that our sleeve has a little bit of an edge now on there, okay? So you can take it longer by repeating our double crochet round, or you can just kind of stop and leave it as is, okay? The next part, we're just going to be repeating what we did with these 2 rounds for both the opening. They're all circles, but they're just different sizes. Obviously, our sleeve circles are going to be smaller, and our opening of our sweater is a bigger circle, but they're all the same. You'll repeat the same steps for all the parts. So you want to put your edging on your other sleeve and then start working edging on the middle larger opening, okay? So when we come back, I'll show you what it looks like to have the edging on all 3 parts, okay? So just keep repeating those rounds on both the sleeves and the center circle. They're all 3 circles, just different sizes. And we'll rejoin and kind of look at our handiwork. Again, you can put as many of the round 2 that we did just now. You can make it very wide and make it sort of like a fold over. And it will make it longer down here as well at the bottom where it wraps around you. Again, you can make your sleeve shorter, long sleeve, etc. It's really up to you. This part is very customizable. So we'll rejoin in just a minute and I'll show you what we've done. Okay, just coming up to the end here, and I don't have quite enough yarn to do a whole nother round, so we're going to just kind of leave it at that. So I'll show you in just a sec. We'll join with a slip stitch to close the round like we normally have been doing all along. And then just cut the yarn, leaving a little tail, and we're going to fasten off, wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the loop, okay? So let's look at what we have here, because we just have a little bit of finish work to do. And then we're going to be done. So we have made a big rectangle. We have seamed it to make sleeves. And then we have just added some edging just to give it a little bit of a finished look. So I'm going to lay it out now so you can see, just kind of get all the wrinkles out. And when you wear this, this will sort of lay like almost like a little collar. But you can see how the edging, just in a textural way, not in a colorway. You could do the edging in a different color, but just kind of gives it a little bit of a finished look, okay? And we've repeated that look for our sleeves as well, okay? So our sweater is just about ready to wear. We just need to weave in some ends. So I'm going to grab a tapestry needle, and anywhere that you see an end, so this was a couple different parts here, so we have ends kind of all over the place. So what's easy about this, because we did this in all one color, is that you can pretty much weave this in wherever. So thread your needle, leaving a tail, and you're just going to go, I'm going to go on the inside of the sweater here, and we're going to go in one direction with our needle, just this way, and then we'll come back in the other direction with our needle, just to sort of lock that tail into place. Anytime you have a wearable like this, it's good to kind of come back in the other direction and get those tails kind of really nice and snug, okay? So you'll just repeat that for all of your other tails, and then we'll rejoin when we're done and just really look at the finished piece. Okay, so we've woven in all of our ends and everything is looking really great. Let me just smooth it out so you can see it. And it's all set, it's all ready to wear. I can't wait to see all of yours. Of course, tag me, Flux. You can see that above. And I'd love to see everyone. So that is how you make an easy crochet cocoon cardigan. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Flux video updates. Thanks again.